Hey, yo, welcome to the Godcast.
The Lord told me to tell you, wake up, wake up, wake up.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth!
Was there an awakening moment?
So this is like an all-encompassing awakening.
It's all-encompassing.
Every day, as they would creep in, I would just have to stop and catch myself right in those moments and say, God, I trust you. I'm not going to be afraid. I'm giving you my fear.
And I also came to the understanding of what you're saying, what you can't have light without dark. But then I started having the thought of, well, if we didn't have nighttime and we didn't have the winter, then plants would never stop growing. So if we never had issues, then we would only grow more. The thing with me, I never got into the astrology stuff. I never got into really doing any kind of energy work until I was very firm with Jesus. And it's a thing with me and Jesus where like people are praying and I'll get the sudden urge to tell that person to give your burdens to Jesus, and they'll say like, oh, I was just trying to talk to Jesus.
Welcome to Godcast.
The Goodness Over Darkness podcast.
Here's your host, Emmanuel Kingman.
What is going on, everybody? I am your host, Emmanuel Kingman, and here with me for this intro, as you heard her interrupt, is Mimi.
That's my job, interrupting. 101.
Yeah, we were just talking about winging it, and you know, we just wing life. So what's the difference? Anyway, we had on a very special guest today, Matt Terrillion from the Great Deception podcast. And man, this was another great conversation. What was your take on it, Mimi?
I love when you do that.
Wait, why don't you expect it? Yeah, well, I mean, I do it every time now. You should kind of expect it.
I enjoyed this conversation as well as this morning's conversation.
Yeah, you were participated a lot in this one as well.
I did. Well, you know, Disney's as a mom. That's easy to participate in.
Yeah, brought you forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah, I liked this episode. We got to talk to Matt, you know, the person, and talk a little bit about him, which I have a lot of common traits, and like we share a lot of similar thoughts and our upbringings, and just there's a lot of similarities there. So I wanted to touch on that, and then we went into Disney and the World's Fairs, which he covered both of these things immensely on his podcast and on YouTube, Instagram, all that stuff. So I really suggest you all check all that out. And I see you got your notes and you're ready to jump in here.
I was just gonna say, you know, when we talk about the World's Fairs, it gives me a chance to talk about my Ripley stuff that I've dug into.
We'll have to do an episode on that.
Yeah, and Barnum, P.T. Barnum, and you know, I like when I can participate with actual knowledge. Yes.
Yeah, well, and that's another thing that we got into, that Mimi doesn't think that she matters. Blah, blah, blah. So I want everyone.
That's not what I said.
I tell her all the time that everybody loves hearing from her, and they're always hitting me up about her. So if you love hearing Mimi, please let us know in the comments. Hit us up on social media. Yeah, she thinks that nobody cares about her. Why does it matter if I'm on camera? Why does it matter if I'm even here in the interview?
I just don't think that people really want to hear from me.
Yeah, she doesn't believe me when I tell her that they do.
Because I'm not as schooled in on certain topics. You know, I love hearing information from people who legit want to do the dig, and they truly want to reteach themselves and inform others. It's so opposite of what is essentially forced learning and forced history led by the education and academic institutions. I would much rather listen to an independent researcher sometimes. I mean, there's plenty of teachers. I'm not putting down any teachers that know tons of information, but these people that have a passion for a certain subject and just soak it up like a sponge, and they just want to get it out to people. That's who I like hearing from. So I don't feel like I'm one of those people that has filled my sponge yet on any particular topic.
Yeah, but you bring a certain flair to the show that it really, and especially a female perspective, which is greatly appreciated in this type of conspiracy theory, independent researcher community, spirituality. It's either usually you hear people it's a lot of
Yeah, I
males.
spent a lot of my 20s studying spirituality things.
Right. It's either a lot of males together, or there's just like two females will do a spiritual show together, that type of thing happens,
Mhm.
or maybe just
Mhm.
one. But it's having a dynamic of a male and female host with a guest that's male or female. It brings a different perspective. Actually, you've never even been on with Michelle Gibson, and
I
she's like your
because
favorite.
I was
I know,
working.
I
I know.
know.
I really wanted to be
Got to
here
get
for
her on
those.
again.
So
I'm sure she'll come
Michelle,
on with you.
I can't wait.
Because
I
you
cannot
found out
wait.
about her before she was even on
Yeah,
Tinfoil
I
Hat.
told you about
Yeah, you
her.
told me about her
I was
months
so
before she was on
excited when I found
Tinfoil.
her website, and I spent like hours just like
Yeah.
scrolling and scrolling and reading and reading and reading and reading. It was like never
The
ending
entire
information.
day.
It was
You spent
great.
the entire day. I was
was so
working,
great.
researching her stuff. It was awesome. You came and bombarded me with you're like, you have to check out her. You have to have her on.
Yeah,
You
like,
have to do this,
what's
that,
on
that.
there? I'm like, everything.
Yeah, and we brought her up several times in this episode as well, because Matt is very much into
fan.
her work as well. Yeah, because
Who isn't,
yeah,
man?
she does some really great work.
She's probably my number one researcher. Independent researcher
Yeah.
that loves to do field work
Yeah.
and really go to these places and really research things, not just, Google something or Wikipedia something. She just really gets into it.
And that's what we do. We got the background, the waterfall. This is a picture we took when we were on vacation. I like to
Mud Creek Falls. That's what that one is.
I like to be boots on
The
ground in
Yeah.
order to really get a feel for it. It makes a difference. It really does, because you can find things out in person that you can't find.
I like that you blew my
otherwise.
mind. That was the first time I was like, huh, I never thought of that. And his mind too. At the same
Oh.
time, we were both like, huh. And I was
About
kind of stuck
Do
there.
you
Like I
wanna
couldn't
tell the audience what that was about?
No, you can.
It was about Disney World being a World's
Oh
Fair.
yeah.
Amusement parks in Disney World being
A permanent World's Fair, essentially.
Yeah,
And that makes total sense since he had, part in creating exhibits for other World's Fairs. Like, why didn't I think of that? Like, duh.
Yeah, I had thought of that. Like I said in the episode, I mentioned the guy's YouTube, but he brings up Disney a lot in it about what it
Programming.
represents.
Oh.
No, what it represents in the map, in these Hyperborea maps. And I just, when I see Epcot and I see
The World of Tomorrow.
yeah, I'm like, yeah, I don't even know about the World of Tomorrow in there, but when I see Epcot and Disney, I'm like, oh, that's just a modern day World's Fair. That's like a current thing going on, that they're shaping the narrative through that, which they're doing it through television, as Haldy said earlier. That television and movies, we're doing it through that as well, but we're doing it through these amusement parks and everything that encompasses, goes along with that. So yeah, we really touched on a lot of Disney, MK Ultra, uh, and the Crystal Palaces, different aspects of the World's Fairs. That's really unbelievable. The red bricks, type of deal we touched on a little bit. Uh, it was a really, really solid conversation. Matt's a really good guy. We talked about children. We spent a good 10, 15, 20 minutes talking about children and the importance of
saving the children.
Yeah,
essentially.
Our own children, of
And us as
teaching
children.
them. Yeah, and teaching our children and making sure that they are prepared. They're prepared for spiritual battle, because we're giving them the knowledge of what what to look for, not exactly what not to go to, but we're saying what to look for, so that they can
Yeah.
detect it themselves, and they can start to see it for themselves, and then they can have the gift of discernment the way that we have the gift of discernment now, and the knowledge and power that we've accrued by doing our research. Well, who's more important to tell than your own children? So we tell our children
Right.
this, and it really helps them.
It did really make me think, because we really are, all of us, every single one of us is guilty of sacrificing our child for work, for
And we
for that
think we're doing it
Netflix
for them.
binge,
We
for
tell ourselves we're
social
doing it for the
media.
betterment of them,
Right.
but it's
Right.
not
And it's
true.
well, or just because,
We're doing it for
you
the
want to do what you want to do,
we do it for the ease, because it's much harder to do, to awaken
Mhm.
and do things yourself, to have your own vegetables, growing your own vegetables, to take care of your own
Mhm.
animals that are producing food, to make sure that you're reading ingredients, to make sure you're not just sitting in front of a TV. It's so easy to be mindless, to just sit in front of a TV
Mhm.
and or on your phone. It's very easy to be mindless and not want to parent your children and not want to make sure you're making the best decisions. It's very easy to not do that.
Right, we're in the age of instant gratification.
Yeah.
Amazon, a Grubhub, all these things
Yeah.
that bring food to your house, the things that bring products to your house. You don't have to you don't have to do any work at all. You can
Right.
just mindlessly push some buttons, and then at your door
Yeah.
is whatever you want.
Yeah. No, she's 100% correct. It is instant gratification.
It's
And
not teaching our kids a good thing. It's
right.
not.
Right. Yeah. It's making them lazy. It's getting us in the mindset of
Completely.
what Matt said at the end about the Wally world of just sitting in your little
Just being a
thing.
robot.
Yep, and being fed food, having servants. Like, yeah, that would be great, but that means someone else has to be lower than you, and that means someone else has to serve you. And so Jesus showed us the example of, if Jesus
Someone
is
has to
God,
suffer.
he was servant. He was showing you how to be a servant to him by, or if you want to say, Jesus was showing you how to be a servant to God by taking care of everybody. Even when people call you a king, you wash their feet. That that is the type of servant that you want to be. That's the type of servant that God wants in his kingdom. It's just really the way it is. God doesn't want lazy people who want other people to serve them. We don't want that in all actuality. We do not want other people to be lower than us to serve us. That is, when you break it down to the simplest form, people really don't want that, but they also don't want what the Matrix offers. So they think that the only counter to what the Matrix offers is to have people lower than you to serve you. But that's not true. We can all be equal and not participate in the doldrum of the Matrix. You can break free of that system, right? So I think that'll do it for this intro. We've been podcasting all day. I
And
made a
cooking.
new video and intro for, so that this episode will be the first one with the new intro. So let me know what you
Enjoy.
guys thought of it. It was a lot of editing and whatnot. So please send your comments in on the YouTube video. And if you're listening to the audio, I suggest you go check out the YouTube version just to see the first minute or so. I think it's like a minute and like 20 seconds or something, to see what it is, and give a like, give a share, give a comment. Directly share this episode with somebody that it can
Yeah,
help.
one person. That's all we need you to do.
Yeah.
Everybody share to one person at least.
Yeah. If you guys feel like you want to donate, I mean, I accept donations. You don't have to, of course, but if you want to donate, you can go to my website and there's a donate tab on there. You can send me money on PayPal as well. My PayPal account, is the name is also on that same donate tab. Um, but really, just liking and sharing, commenting, rate
Spreading
and
the
review
word.
on Apple, or if anywhere else, if they have a rate and review thing, I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. If you want to go to my website to hit me up for some energy work, I can teach it. I do this. This is the spiritual nature of things. I have mentorship programs. I have clients, and you can hit me up for a free consultation, even if you don't want energy work, but you just want to talk to someone about your crazy ideas. Hit me up. I mean, I talk to people all the time about that, and I don't talk to people in the promise of I'll get money later. I talk to people in the promise of helping them. I'm here to help. I ask God, use me to my best, most efficient abilities. And what has God led me to? Talk to people, have them contact you because they need someone to talk to. I am, I'm not being conceited here, but I'm a black belt in these conspiracies. I understand and can get a grasp on any of it. Your crazy thinking, trust me, I've thought crazier things. I've had crazier experiences. So while you will still blow my mind, a lot of people always blow my mind. I'm not going to judge you for what you have to say. I'm going to talk to you like a person. And if you just want to have that conversation, hit me up. You don't have to be looking for energy work in order to get the free consultation. If you just want to talk, hit me up. And if it's interesting enough, we'll get you on the show if we can get a good episode out of it. I've had listeners on the show before. So, that's no problem at all. I enjoy doing that. It's what my path is. You have anything else?
Nope.
All right.
Good to go.
All right. So, yeah, ManuelKingman.com. Oh, I do want you all to go read the article that Matt suggested as well. The WTF is a Tartarian. Share that around to everybody. Share that around to your mom, your grandmom, your uncles, your nieces, whoever. I don't care. Share it to people because Tartaria was a real thing. It was a real place on the map. And especially you're a conspiracy theorist, and they always ask the question of why? If that's true, then why? And we can never really explain the why. Well, this explains the why of all the other conspiracies. Because if this is happening, what I say in this article, if the Millennial Kingdom happened and that's the cover up, then every other conspiracy extends off of covering up this. And we're in a place in time now where the unveiling is occurring, the apocalypse, the revealing of information, of
And
hidden
how do you
information.
cover a big fat lie? With lots and lots of little lies.
Right. And you change things here and there and everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So this explains the why. Okay. So go read that article, please. You can comment on that if you like to. You have an ability to comment. I have a lot of good articles on there that you guys would enjoy, but that one specifically, I am really asking people to go share that around because that can help change the mindset of many, and it can help a lot of people understand the why conspiracies
Put some pieces
happen
together for people.
Yes. Yeah. And you'll have to do your own research after on all these different topics. But I mean, this is a really good starting point. So without further ado, here is Matt Terry. Hello, everybody. On today's episode, I have on a guest who is doing great research into the deception of our realm. He digs deep into topics and brings forth his findings on his podcast, Instagram, and guest appearances. He is host of the Great Deception podcast. Everybody, welcome Matt Terrillion to the show. Welcome to the show, Matt. Did I get your last name right?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's Terrillion. People pronounce it any which way. As long as Matt is good enough.
All right. Well, Matt from the Great Deception podcast, with probably the best podcast name that I've heard in the conspiracy theory community. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you for having me, man. I've been following your show a lot, quite a bit lately, even more, because the topics you have are great, and I love the way you approach it. I'm not I'm not gonna say I'm not spiritual. I'm not very religious. And to watch your approach to it is a very refreshing approach. I love the way you look at things.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I'm not religious either, actually. People sometimes, and this happened with Haldy, as I mentioned in the intro, at the end of the episode, he says that he wasn't too sure if he wanted to come on because I'm always Jesus. I'm talking about Jesus all the time. So it gives this perception that I'm religious or Christian or with the church, and I'm not with any of that. The Jesus saved me in a way, and I promote him, but it's not from a religious standpoint. like my mind was burst open, and then I came to Jesus afterwards. So I'm still completely open-minded to everything, and it's not from an indoctrination standpoint. And I try breaking people free of that indoctrination from the church, but still keeping their basic principles and understanding that it's a much larger teaching.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because one of the things I've been researching lately a little bit, I found this great book called Rulers of Evil, by F. Tupper Saucy. And what it is, it looks at the connections between Rome and the Jesuits and America and the establishment of America. And when they're going through that, one of the things that they're saying is that one of the biggest things that the church used was the power of them being your connection to God. And the only way you're getting to God is through them, whether it was not printing Bibles or not teaching people to read, not teaching services in different languages. It was just, you start seeing it, that the system was set up not to benefit you. And that really the way to find it is, like you just said, salvation is through you. It's through you and your personal relationship with God or your Savior, whoever that may be. And that's something that really threw me for a loop, because I wasn't from a religious family, but there was always something missing. And when I started looking into the spirituality side, I started, finding more about myself too, which was a really powerful thing. And realizing that you're not just this little speck, you are this powerful being that if you focus your energy, you can do just about whatever you want within reason. So
Right.
yeah, it is a powerful experience, and I'm fresh to spirituality. I only got into it in 2020 when the lockdown happened and everything was going haywire. I needed something to save me, right? And that's what I went to, and I really feel a much stronger person. And it's only been, like I said, a year and a half.
Yeah, I only got into it in 2019, and I'm honored that you said you enjoy my podcast, because I listen to your podcast. You have some really great breakdowns. I remember it was months and months ago when I first came across you. Maybe you didn't even have an episode out yet, I think, or maybe it was like one. It was like right at the beginning of your podcast. I was like, well, firstly, it's a great name, and then secondly, like I started seeing all the stuff you're posting about Howdy McCoskey with the World's Fairs, and I'm like, oh, okay, I want to talk to this guy. And it didn't work out then until just now, but I think it's the perfect timing, because everything is happening all at once. Whenever, like, we're manifesting this world, right? Like, in a sense that we're all co-creators, and certain things I try, like going outside of the box of time that things are supposed to happen in, and God like slaps my hand away. He's like, nope, not yet. Nope. Like, be patient, it'll happen, just wait. And now here we are.
Well, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I just did a podcast with my buddy Nico, who does the Upstate Unconventional podcast, and we were talking about some paranormal experiences. And one of the things that I told him is I had two ghost experiences when I was living in Connecticut, probably about 18 years ago. And they both involved people in 1800s garb. One was a woman, one was a man. And, the town I was in at the time was known back at that time as a hatter town. So they both had the 1800s hats on. Well, come to find out, 2020, 2021, I spent the better part of my life researching the 1800s, and I never thought I would. But my buddy pointed that out. He goes, maybe that was a sign to you that you're going to have to start looking into this stuff. And I'm like, you just blew my mind right there, because I never made any correlation whatsoever. But now I am obsessed with the 1800s, and like what you would consider Tartaria. I mean, I gotta say, Emmanuel, your article was one of the best articles I've read on it. The way you broke it down,
wow,
you
thank
blew
you.
my mind in a couple spots with one of the things you said about if the pyramids were around that in the time the Bible was written, why is there no mention of them in the I was like, oh wow, I never even thought about that. So yeah, that article is amazing, my friend, and I recommend everyone go read that.
Well, thank you so much for that. And you've been doing a lot of stuff on Is America Israel? I saw that you've been reading books about this, and I've come to that conclusion without, I saw you start posting the books a few days after I started having all these thoughts, and I'm like, man, is America Israel? And playing with that idea, could we fulfill all the same things? And who would the Jewish people be? Oh, wait, the Amish. And then everything just lines up, and it's um, the Grand Canyon is that Egypt over there. Then you have California had the Red Sea, and it's like, hold on a second, what is actually happening here? And the way that I think the world works is this fractal nature is smaller and larger scale events are always repeating themselves. And is America Israel, but is also the rest of the world a copy of America, because this is like the starting point on the Fibonacci sequence, and as we get wider, the rest of the world is on an outer ring. It's a lot of crazy ideas and wild concepts, but when you understand that the Fibonacci sequence and the fractal nature of reality, that's really how it is. We just don't understand on that level. We try making everything on our level rather than go to that level. It really opens your mind up to possibilities. And like you're saying, I found that meme yesterday on Facebook. It blew my mind. That is if the pyramids and Sphinx are that old, why is there no mention of it in the Bible? You would think that that'd be pretty important. I mean, they were the slaves in Egypt, right? That would have built the pyramids. So
Yep.
how is that fit together?
Well, and like you were saying, you also have the Mississippi River, which is almost the equivalent to the Nile.
Yeah.
And around the Mississippi, one of the things that you find is an abundance of burial mounds, right? You find them all along, up and down the river. So you know that there were older civilizations there. And my hardest thing is believing that, aside from the natives, no one was here
Right.
for 1500 years. There was just nothing going on, this massive land mass, all of the Americas, and it was just no significance. And then all of a sudden, one white guy ships over from Spain, and all of a sudden everything unlocks, and now this is the next phase of the of life, and this is the new world. And I just find that hard to believe, because as you start looking into things, you start finding evidence that supports that maybe we were around a lot longer. I mean, you look at there's been some mention of the Pyramid of Cholola, which is in Mexico, there's some people that say it's 50,000 years old. There's others that say it was started around 3 BC, but there's debate out there as to when that was started. And that pyramid has a base that's twice the size of the Pyramid of Giza. So we're talking about a massive structure that was built. It's not nearly as tall, but the base is twice as wide. So you start looking into some of these things and seeing that it's possible, right? Am I sold on it? Am I gonna mortgage my life? No, I'm not. I don't believe anything to that extent right now. But is there evidence? Yeah. And the more you start looking into it, there's a great possibility that there was something great here. It was erased and it was rebuilt.
Yeah, when you start incorporating Anatoly Fomenko, and he says that the Old Testament happened after the New Testament, and that 1,000 years, the year 0 to the year 900 and something, actually, he says, are all not real events. Then you start to really wonder, like, okay, if things were here, and if things are flip flopped in that manner, I don't know how he does it with the mathematical algorithms and equations that he does. He's some mathematician, Russian mathematician, if anyone out there is unfamiliar. But when you start to put these pieces together, you're like, okay, maybe something was here, an event happens, and then there's almost nothing here where everything's covered in mud. My last episode with Michelle Gibson, she really broke down that the Midwest was covered in mud and we were uncovering something. So I think that something happened probably around the 1200s, according to our timeline, the 1200s, that covered this place with mud. And then we came back in the 1500s and found the people who were still living here, mostly on the East Coast, because I think the Midwest was really destroyed. And then we started uncovering things. So when we have this great gold rush in the West, and all this Lewis and Clark's stuff, I think that was more of digging out mud from homes and buildings that already existed, rather than we were going out there and there was nothing there, and we were looking for it. And when we look in our history, what event could there have been? Well, the Bible tells us Babylon was and the Tower of Babel, it was destroyed. And if America is Israel, could it have been Babylon as well? And so I get these wild ideas, and then somehow I end up getting evidence for it after the fact by different people doing different researches into different fields. And it's like, wow, this is really starting to make a clear picture, when I was just babbling on nonsense.
Yeah, but you're starting to see it, right? That's the amazing part about all this, is that those crazy ideas that you had, or those childish ideas that a lot of people would say, are possible. There is a real possibility to them as you look into it. We've been sold a bill of goods that greatly underestimates our power and the significance of our history. And there's certain peoples that have been all but eliminated from history. And, we don't know why, other than the fact that they must have had something that they didn't want us to see. And we run into that with, the Tartarians. You run into that with, here in America, there's a large Moor presence that you're never told about. Right. And I heard one of the things you guys were talking about, Georgia, in the interview with Howdy. And one of the things significant about Georgia is, in Georgia, there's Rome, Georgia, which was the capital for the Cherokee. So that is,
and they say they were Romans and they had slaves.
Exactly. Yes. So they're saying they're the original Romans, and that Rome basically copied what they did in Italy.
Which goes along with Fomenko saying that, this is that Rome is the two different, quote unquote, the two different time periods are actually one time period. Well, my idea is maybe one was here and one was there simultaneous.
That's what I'm starting to think too, is that, although one of the difficulties is putting it in a linear timeline, right? Because I'm not sold that time is linear. So that makes things a lot more difficult too, because you end up with these waves almost of history, these patterns, like you said before, that repeat over time. And I haven't quite figured out how it works or how many there were, right? But there were multiple resets over time. And, whether you take the Noah story as one, that was a flood. We look at, there was definitely some sort of, and they may be the same event, right? Noah's Ark may be the same time as the mud flood. We have no way to tell. But it's a fascinating thing to think about. It's one of those where, to throw out these ideas, and there's nothing wrong with putting them out there. That's one of the things I laugh at, is when I put some of these ideas out there for people to, throw their 2 cents in, or just sit there and think about it. You get that, oh, you're retarded, aren't you? Oh, what's wrong with you, man? Oh, you eating paint chips again? I'm like, no, I don't necessarily believe in this, but it's something I'm thinking about, and to just automatically ignore it is ignorant. That's just that model of thinking. And I can't relate to that anymore. At this point, you tell me something, I will consider it, no matter how crazy it may be. I'll sit there and contemplate it, and then maybe a 5-minute think, and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, that's dumb. I'm over that. But not give it any credence. I feel like that is doing it a disservice. And there's a lot of people out there that don't want this because it would shatter their reality.
Right. And it's so funny when I pose a lot of questions, on Twitter a lot of times, and then I'll just post it on Instagram as well after I tweet it. But I pose a lot of questions that are really out there ideas it's not really a question asking someone for a specific answer. Like, I'm saying, is America Babylon? And then I'll have people reply like, no. And that'll be like the only thing they'll say. And I just laugh. I'm like, oh, like, okay.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah. That's a great contribution to the conversation, guys. Thank you. Yeah,
Right?
I love those.
It's
It just doesn't
hilarious.
it doesn't do anything. It's like, okay, why did you even waste the energy, right? Or why are you still following me when you get these people? I get one guy that just constantly everything I post, or once a week, it's, well, why don't you? What are you hiding here? What are you trying to say? I'm like, dude, you're just trying to pick a fight with me. I'm not here
Yeah.
for that. Just unfollow me. It's a lot easier.
But they don't want to because they can't really, because now, so the whole thing hinges on, if they believe what you believe, then they have to shatter their reality. So that they want to, there's something in them that's intrigued enough to stay following you, but they don't want to let go of their reality enough to actually ask themselves. So they ask you direct questions. And if you can't, it's like if you have a house of cards, right, and then you pull out the tablecloth from under it, they want you to make sure that it stays standing rather than just let it fall and build up a new one. They can't, they need the whole thing there for them in order to transfer. Okay, I'm going from this belief to this belief, and the structure's still in place, rather than, shatter the whole thing and rebuild it yourself. You don't need anyone else to build your
Forget
beliefs
what you
for you.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, you
Well,
need to
and
let
that's the
go of it.
thing. And then once you start learning, truly learning, you realize you know nothing. And the more
Exactly.
that
Mhm.
you know, the more questions you have, and you feel like you know less than you knew when you started this. And
Yeah.
it's an amazing process, because I've spent the better part of, since the lockdown, just doing research and in my free time, because all the hobbies that I did and stuff that I used to do doesn't exist anymore, or it's,
Mhm.
there's COVID protocols. So I'm like, okay, I'm not doing any of this. So I've just, I've gotten back into books and reading, and the stuff that you find out there, and the great researchers, the independent people, the small people they find the most amazing stuff. And we're in a great era of sharing too. The
Yeah.
knowledge and the information that's being passed right now is at an all-time high, but you have to use a little discernment, because there
Oh,
is a
yeah.
lot of bogus information out there, and that's where I kind of was initially on the whole Tartaria thing. Was it came out like a house of cards on fire. It was out there, and then all of a sudden, everywhere you looked, it was on everybody was talking about it. And I was like,
Mhm.
this is almost like it's a psyop, is
Yeah.
this their next attempt at like a Q type thing? And then I was like, no, I started looking into it. And at first I was very skeptical, but Howdy turned me around. And once I read his book, I'm like, there's no better evidence that the story just doesn't and
Yeah.
then you start looking into other stories. Yes. That
Yeah,
is like,
everyone get this book.
oh, that thing that opened my mind to a new place, that now I have a wall full of books here because of that one book, because it's so fascinating to think about the world's fairs and what were they really, what was their real intention? Because you look at a bunch of them, they lost millions of dollars at a
Mhm.
time when millions of dollars is really tens of millions of dollars. And you wouldn't keep repeating that as a business person, right? And these people are the ultimate business people. So from
Right.
that standpoint, that made me right away say, whoa, there's something up here, because if they're losing money and they continue to do it, there's some alternate motive or ulterior motive there. And I think there's multiple. It's so deep and so layered that, you can get into things like the orphan trains, you can get into the infantoriums, the buildings themselves, the people that made it to the fair. Like in Chicago, they said 27.5 million people made it there when the city only had a population of around 1 million.
Hmm.
So to think that they had the infrastructure in place and everything like that in, the time frame that they said they built it in, which is around a little over 2 years, it just, it doesn't add up, because we couldn't do it today with modern technology and abilities.
Right. Yeah, and especially, I mean, the mud floods, like, everyone tries to debunk the mud floods in whatever manner. Like, okay, it is what it is, but how do they build these buildings with horse and buggy, and these roads are just completely covered with mud? I mean, it doesn't make that's the part to me, like, that's the smoking gun, if you will, you know? You have these beautiful structures everywhere, and they have mud everywhere with horse and buggy. How's it
Or
happening?
they're on a hill, right?
Yeah.
Or they're supposedly built into a hill. Why at that time when you do not have cranes, you do not have anything to move massive amounts of land that we know of, build on a hill? So obviously the building was there, and then the dirt came afterwards, or mud, or the land came afterwards, because it just doesn't make any sense that you would build into a hill in that location. You know,
Yeah.
you look at a lot of old San Francisco, especially.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean,
New York
everything.
too. Yeah, both of those 2 are
Yes.
real big into
Well, there's a city
in the
under the
hills.
city in New
Right.
York, is what they say, you know? And then you think about places like Kansas City, where there's just such a vast network of tunnels and underground systems. They have a highway that's underground there. I mean, it's just
Wow, really? I didn't know that.
it's things that, well, I know there's one on the East Coast. I think it's in Pennsylvania, actually, where you can go into a tunnel and basically go cross country underground. They use it for trucking and shipping and things to
Oh,
move
wow. I'll have to
materials
look
much
into that.
faster. Yeah, it's this giant tunnel,
Pennsylvania.
and you drive into like the side of the mountain.
Yeah,
And go ahead.
well, Elon Musk right now is allegedly that's what he's doing. He's making a tunnel from LA to Vegas. No, he's not making
I
it.
mean,
They're
it's already
uncovering
there.
the tunnels that are there. Yeah.
They found a bunch of tunnels. Now they're trying to figure out, how do we get all this stuff out of here?
Right. Yeah, it's really wild. So I had a few questions for you, specific to you, because you've been doing such great work on all of this stuff. Now, the name H. Bancroft and who's the other guy? Richard Bancroft. Now, apparently, they wrote the King James Bible. And maybe there's not even related. It's just weird that that's their last name. But the King James version of the Bible, and also like 600,000 pages or 60,000 pages of our American history. You know, I might have messed up a little bit there, but
It's 600,000 pages, that H.
wow.
Bancroft. So what the story is Richard Bancroft was King James's right-hand man and helped him write the King James Bible. And then there's this gentleman during the world's, 1800s in America, named H. Bancroft, who was his story is very interesting, because he's a small-time book dealer in Buffalo, New York, who in the 1850s, who is sent to San Francisco to sell books. Now, if you know that time frame in San Francisco, that's during the gold rush.
Mhm.
I find it very hard to believe that the gentleman working in the gold rush and the population going to the gold rush is very interested in antique books or buying books, you know? So there's
Mhm.
one piece of the story that doesn't really make sense. And then he gets there, and all of a sudden he starts just putting out all these volumes of work. And just basically what it sounds like is he was sent out there to go acquire any knowledge that he could of the West, and get up any literature he can, collect it, and then reinterpret it to fit the narrative that they wanted. I mean, he has 6 volumes alone on the natives. And each volume, I believe, is up to 10,000 pages.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, the number of material that this guy supposedly wrote is just mind-blowing, and it doesn't really make sense. And he's big into I believe it's the Stanford he has a library there at Stanford University now, the Bancroft Library. But yeah, he's one that is definitely one of the shapers of the narrative, from a written point of view. He like we said, 600,000 pages worth of information that he produced. And it's just volumes and volumes on the American West and the natives.
Do they have a
Which,
time frame on how he put this? Was it in 10 years? Was it 50 years? Was it his lifetime? Do you know
let me see. Let me
exactly?
see. I have his notes right here. He was less than 20 years.
Wow,
He wrote,
600,000 in 20 years?
yeah,
How could he
it's
have time to study anything else?
exactly. Well, no, basically what they were doing is they were rewriting what they had
Right.
found, right? So they're not
Okay.
research. They're just taking what they found. Oh, I don't like that. We're going to change him from a native name to now he's going to have an Anglo name, kind of thing. And
Right.
but yeah, he put out 39 volumes, and each of them were about 1,500 pages in this North American collection that he put out.
Wow, that's incredible. And here's a synchronicity for you. I had right after my interview with Howdy, somebody emailed me and they suggested that I talk to this gentleman named Howard. Uh, he has multiple last names. His name is Howard De La Cruz dash Bancroft. H. Bancroft. And it was a Howard
Ooh.
while I would talk to Howdy, whose real name is Howard. So all these synchronicities coming, and I was planning on asking you about this because you've done some really great research on all this stuff. So look at all the synchronicities that happen in that.
Man, it's wild how it all lines up, and you don't go looking for it. It finds you. That's the beauty
Yeah.
of it. Just be
Yeah.
open, and that's what I say to everyone. I used to be closed off. I was, I
Me
was
too.
very, and I just wasn't interested. I was in the mainstream life, and then all of a sudden I opened up a little, and now I'm having people come to me or information coming to me that, I'm not looking for it, but it's at the right time when when it's very useful.
Yeah, and you're wearing an Atlanta Braves hat now, I see, and I'm in Georgia near Atlanta. They just won the World Series. I was a baseball player in my day, I got too big for my britches, so to speak, and I stopped playing because it got boring for me because I was better than everybody else, and I was playing with people much older than me, and it wasn't even really a challenge, and I fell into drugs and girls and all. But you had a pretty good career. You actually are in a Hall of Fame. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a men's league that I played in after college. I played, 4 years of college, and then it was a interesting league. It was a bunch of. It wasn't like a pickup league. It was guys that had played college ball and minor league ball that all got together, and it was really competitive. I mean, they did awards, massive awards at the end of the year and everything. So it was really cool, man. And to get honored at the end of it for to the Hall of Fame was really cool. But that seems like a lifetime ago. I keep telling people that was like, that was it was only 10 years ago, which is crazy to think that in that short amount of time, things have changed that drastically. But yeah, man, I used to live for baseball. I was a sports guy all around, whether I could watch it, consume it, read about it,
Yeah, me too.
or play it, and now I'm like, I don't even care anymore.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have the Eagles. Wrong arm. I have the Eagles Super Bowl victory tattooed on my arm here. You can't really see because my virtual background is messing up my skin color on here, and it's making me part of the background. But sports was everything to me, and it's funny how when I start to research these ancient things that the Greek Olympics, this is what they did. This is everybody competed against each other in this sports type of manner. And we have taken that concept and made it an everyday thing. And everybody makes not everybody, but people get involved in this and they make their entire life about this one thing. You have to specialize in it because if you're not the best, then you're really just wasting your time to some degree. If like you can do everything that you want, um, you can try to be the student and the athlete, but then it gets to a point where it's hard, and a lot of students are like, yeah, the school's stupid, and they'll just push me through if I work on this, and then all of a sudden you have a broken leg or whatever, and you're done forever, and now you're in a place where you don't know anything because your whole life, you were a child and these adults around you pushed you into the sport because you can have a great life and you're so good, but we don't understand the magnitude of how good you really have to be a professional athlete, how much time you have to dedicate yourself. And it was so hard for me coming to the realization that professional sports are completely fake, that they're all thrown. I mean, it's not every single player every time, but it's one player on one play at one time will, you have to take a knee, you have to miss this pass that you make every time, you have to strike out looking, you have to. And when we look at sports through those lenses. Like, how does someone in the biggest moments make the biggest blunders? It's because it's set up that way. And it's something that easy just changes the whole outcome of everything. What's your opinion on that?
Oh, I agree with you. I think and you asked me this 2 years ago, I would have said you're crazy, but
Yeah, me
yeah, I
too.
think a lot of professional sports is fixed. And you've had athletes, I know a couple NFL players have come out and said that. They said that the NFL games are fixed. And when you think about it, it's not that hard to do. The referees, all they have to do is make one bad call at the right time. There are certain instances where they can impact the outcome of the game, or like you said, one player is all it takes. And I think with the amount of money that's at stake, not only, for the teams themselves, but in gambling circles and in
And the
Vegas.
loosh.
Oh, it is a giant energy loosh is what sports are. They're just, you think about the stadium itself. It's just an arena that collects all this energy and builds it up. And you always look at the arenas and they look like an eye, and it makes you
Oh, I
wonder.
didn't even think of that. Wow.
Yeah, they're always circular with a hole in the middle. So if you look at it from an aerial view, they all look like eyes, and it's like, are they gathering up this energy for something greater than just the sports event at hand?
Yeah, and of course, in America, as we were saying, or as I was saying earlier, that I think everything else, the rest of the world kind of mimics America. Is we have it in every single city, whereas and state, states, or I mean, multiple cities in a state sometimes. Whereas, like Europe, they'll have one per country, and it's what is actually happening? Why are they harvesting our loot in this manner? And all this stuff. It's really when you start to understand the energetic nature of reality, you can see like, oh, they're pitting us against each other, and then they're training us through sport. And even when you're not in sports, when you're in politics, you're doing the same thing. They're training you to fight someone else and say someone else is keeping you down, someone else is doing this. Everything is externally happening to you rather than things are just happening and you're experiencing it. And it's not, people aren't your enemy, you're just perceiving it that way. Yeah, I mean, it's a whole big thing of how they cover everything up. They just distract us because this cover up that you're big into, that I'm big into, is only 200 years old. It's not very long ago, and that's the really, I think, the mind-blowing part, the outrageous part for most people to comprehend. I had a guy on here that said that, but I know my grandparents, they were alive then, and then they had grandparents that were alive, and we would have known something if this was to have occurred. We would have known something. And it's like, well, if we didn't have the internet, I'm near Savannah, right? And Atlanta, like I said, it isn't that far. Uh, depends on what you're talking about, how big of an area. It's 5 hours away, but only being 5 hours away, if there was a cataclysmic event to happen in Atlanta and there was no internet, how would I possibly ever know that? I just wouldn't. So when we think that something happened, cataclysms happened in the 1800s, a bunch of separate events all over the place happened. Well, maybe your grandma wouldn't know. It's very likely that they wouldn't. If you're in Canada and someone's in Australia and something, how would you ever find that out? It's kind of ridiculous to think that you would find out about another area.
Yes, because we're used to the 24-hour news cycle, right? And we're
Exactly.
that instant information, and like we said, we're in the era of information sharing. So to think about a time when we're told that you couldn't really pass information that quickly. I mean, they had telegraph, but that was about it. So you're not passing information greatly. So that's the perfect breeding ground for something like this to happen. I mean, and that's why if you look at, I mean, to make it comparable to our situation, what did they do initially? They locked everything down. They separated everyone. They shut down churches and meeting places, bars, restaurants where people would go and talk. And once you eliminate the ability of communication, you can do a lot of things and get away with it. And a lot of, and that's what happens throughout history that people don't realize is you're sold this one story that is the narrative. It's not what actually happened. It's what happened with a twist usually. To make one side look good and one side look bad. And that's what we see a lot in the, and you pointed out in the Tartari article, tartars, tartar sauce, retard, all these words that are related to it. And you wonder why, and you start looking into it, and word magic is a real thing. I really believe that the English language, has been used in a manner to deceive the population. And I think it is. I think it's a tool. That's what they use. They use language. They use symbols to let you know what's going on, but not tell you flat out. Right? Because they have to get rid of that karmic debt. They can't just do these things to you without your consent. And so if you see it and do nothing, that's your consent in their eyes because you didn't object. So we've been given a lot of symbols across time that we did not recognize, and we were told about them in advance and slept right through it, and they got away with it and ran through their plan. And that was, you look at the last reset in the 1800s. I mean, you look at the 1800s, and that's just a wild time. I mean, the amount of massive fires. I mean, we'll even go back to the beginning. Look at the beginning of it. You start out with the War of 1812, which I heard you say it's World War I, really. I mean, people say it's World War, that started everything. That was really one of the big wars. And you get into things like the New Madrid earthquake, right? That's a massive one where, people don't realize that the Mississippi River was flowing in the opposite direction for 3 days. I mean, that's something to make that
some
happen.
Biblical shit.
Yeah, really. I mean, think about that. That to have that happen. I mean, that had to be a massive earthquake. And then, I know you've pointed this out too, the year without a summer, right? You go to 1816, and then you start going from there, and you look at the major fires in the cities. And it's just city after city just burns down. But then you look at when you get into the later 1800s and see some of the photographs, they don't appear to be fires. It appears to be almost like some sort of weapon, some sort of explosive that was used, because you look at some of the buildings, and we're talking about brick and stone buildings that only have a facade left, pieces of a facade. And that doesn't make any, but then you look right next door, there's 3 little wood huts still standing, never got touched. It just it doesn't make sense.
It's like the Dews in California. How I was watching a video on that yesterday. Excuse me. But you have the houses are all completely gone, but the forest is still around, and it's
trees are unburnt.
Fires. Yeah. Like what is actually happening here? And you were just saying with the fires, with everything that was happening in the 1800s. I had somebody send me this photo. I'll have to try to get it included in the video, and I'll maybe send it out. But there is an art piece by Adolf Volmy on November 12th, 1833. There was a meteor shower so intense that it was possible to see up to 100,000 meteors crossing the sky every hour. At the time, many thought it was the end of the world, so much so that inspired this art piece. So I don't know if my camera will pick it up, but you can.
Yeah, you got
there
it
you
there.
go.
That's good.
Yeah,
wow.
I mean,
look at that.
Yeah, like that is meteors raining down on Earth, exactly as the Bible said. And this is all, I think, a part of the second destruction of the Earth, according to the Bible, where everything would be from fire. The destruction by fire is the year without a summer. The sun will be blackened out, the moon won't be there. That exactly happened. It would be war and rumors of war. That all happened. This is why else would they cover it up unless it was something that was here that they don't want us to know about? And when we have this guy named Richard Bancroft wrote the Bible, did they leave out a part that says what you're supposed to do after the second destruction of the Bible, because the Revelation, the book of Revelation is where it ends at, and that's saying it's leading up to the final judgment, which I think that we're actually in the final judgment, but there's really no other information in there about what you should do, how you should act, and anything. There's no real prophetic things for this time period that we're actually in, and so nobody really knows what time period we're in. And all these prophets that I'm sure that there's still been many prophets that have been born. We just don't view them that way. People that are touched by God and messengers of God, if you will, and we don't view it that way. But they have the perspective that we're in a time period where we're waiting for the rapture to happen, so they don't have the comprehension to have anything else come to them. They don't have it within them to say, "Oh, the rapture has occurred." They don't have the understanding, so how could they possibly relay a message that they can't comprehend? And they changed all of this I think, for that reason, because they found out that no matter what they did to humanity, that we were still going to be connected to God. If they want us at a level of consciousness to work for them, then we can just access God. It's just really how it is.
Yeah, and they're going to use all their powers in deception, basically, right? They're going to get you to acquiesce one way or another, whether it's through fear, whether it's through faith, whether it's through, false idolatry. They're going to get you to go to their side if they want, right? And that's what they're looking for. The whole, one of the things I really feel about this is a spiritual war that we're in right now. It's a battle of the mind. And if you think about coronavirus, corona means crown, and that is the mind virus, and that's what we're in right now, because the battle that we're in this world is for the thoughts and minds of people, because we're going into this transition or they want us to go in this transition from now into the technocratic world, where we are partially AI. They are able to predict our emotions and our thoughts before we even think or do them. And if they can get there, then they're fine with us, because then they can control us or prevent us from doing whatever they don't want us to do. But we still have that God-given ability to not bow down, right? To not get into that. You can stay away from that world. You don't have to get sucked in, but many do, because they don't see any other option. They see fear, and they see the government as a savior, as someone who's looking out for their best interests, which in itself is kind of an insane thought. So I don't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
where
it
you
is.
go from there with it, because many people have just been so devoured by this that it's almost like it's when they talk about it in the Bible, there's the 144,000, right? And it's almost like this is a separation. There's a weeding going out right now, and there's those who are going to be able to push through this, and those who aren't. And I don't know what's going to happen. Honestly, we are in a very, very wild, and it's just an ever-changing time, day to day, sometimes. And I feel it. I don't know about you, but I
Oh
feel
yeah.
the energy waves that are coming through, because there's some days, man, it just hits you like a ton of bricks, and
Yeah.
it's like, wow, that's a heavy energy today, and I gotta do some work to get out of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do like my mentorship program that I do, the when I have clients that I'm working with them individually, like what ends up happening is what I'm working with them ends up turning out that it happens in the rest of the world. And it's as above, so below. And it's really, I can experience it on a personal level, then I experience it on a external level. And when I start to put the pieces together like that, I don't want to say I can predict the future, but I can get a rough estimate of what's about to occur. But then I also get like what's people call downloads, this information dumps of what's coming to me, and doing my meditative practices. Now I've been reading the Bible and then closing my eyes and meditating that way. And I'm getting it stronger. It's like it's coming in more droves. It's like I'm getting closer to the truth almost, which is hard. It's a hard thing to understand what the truth actually is, or whatever. And Howdy and I just talked about all that, but it's we're in a place where we are definitely being deceived. And I really love the name of your podcast, the Great Deception Podcast. And I want to ask you where you came up with that. And also, do you think that the Great Deception, what is your idea of the Great Deception? Because I have my own idea that maybe comes from meditation and the Bible as well. But you may have a different perception on it. So what is your take on that, and how did you come up with that name?
How I came up with it, it was kind of one of those where I sat there for a few days and I would just come up with different ideas for a podcast because I had been on podcasts for probably almost a year prior to starting my own, and from peer pressure, I finally caved in and decided to do it and get it going. And when I wrote that one down, I'm like, oh, somebody has to have this. So I went to check, and there was a Great Deception out there, but it was a very, religious, I think it's a Catholic podcast, but they didn't have the Great Deception podcast. They were just the Great Deceptions. I'm like, okay, I'll at least have that on my own. And what really I think it is the Great Deception is, like we talked about before, that we are much more powerful than we are led to believe, that we have been indoctrinated to a point where we are machine-like in our mannerisms and our lifestyles, and we're in the matrix, so to speak. And I think that the Great Deception is being stuck in that web, in that matrix, and not being able to see out of it, not to see behind the curtain, and that everything that you're presented on news and in media, movies, television, it's a lot of times propaganda, and it's meant to get you to think in a certain way or evoke certain emotions out of you. And like we were talking about sports before, one of the things that really turned me off to them was in 2020 when they went political, because one of the reasons why I went to sports was to get out of the political realm and the left versus right, because I knew that was all nonsense. But then when politics came into sports, I'm like, nope, this is a bad combination. I want no part of it. And that's what it is. The deception is, you think you're watching a sports game, but you're being indoctrinated all along, whether it's with the announcers, the players, the uniforms, the crowd, the national anthem, the commercials in between. It's all rigged to get you to do certain things. And that's really what I think, from my standpoint, the Great Deception is just that we've been lied to. And a lot of what the power, and more so the power of man on a larger scale, we've been lied to as a human beings, as to the restrictions that we have and the limitations that we have, when we've seen, based on historical records and myths, that there's much more possible that we could have in us.
Yeah, and I think that the way that you started your podcast with exposing Disney and the MK Ultra is a huge part of the Great Deception, and what you're saying, the deceiving, the distracting nature of everything. Do you want to touch on Disney a little bit, about how anything interesting that you've come across? Because you have, well, at least 2, maybe 3 episodes of this when you really, really break this down.
Oh yeah, I was the Disney guy when I first started my podcast. Everybody had me on. Hey, let's talk about Disney. And what it was, and ironically, that started out as I saw a meme about Disney being a Freemason, and I laughed. I'm like, oh, this is so stupid. I'm gonna go debunk this. And so I started looking into it, and I was like, okay, well, he was in the Order of the Demolay as a child, and he was initiated into their Ring of Honor as an adult. And you start looking at it, then you see Disney's connected to the FBI, and Disney's connected to the CIA, and you see Disney's connected to NASA, and he's connected to the Nazis. And then you start hearing whispers of child abuse and sexism and things like that were taking place on the Disney campus. And it really snowballed. And I started finding more and more. And even today, I keep getting more bits and pieces over here. And there may even be a part 2 eventually of that. because the real thing, why it hit home with me was because growing up, we watched a lot of Disney, and I didn't realize the programming that's involved in Disney's productions. And, you know, between the instances of child abuse in their cartoons, which are directed and aimed at children, basically what these Disney movies are trauma inducing shows to really scare kids and put, and lately they've gotten wild with, I mean, there's transgender cartoons now and all sorts of stuff that are just meant to pervert young minds. You know, it's not things that young children should be dealing with. And I was trying to just expose that to some people to say, because I feel like Disney is a cult. I feel like there are many that have drank the Kool-Aid with them. And I have family members that are that way. They go to Disney every year. They, you know, one of them won't talk to me because I put out that Disney episode, because just because I told her flat out and I showed her evidence, and she just got so mad at me. She's like, I'm never talking to you again. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm like, that's fine. I can't live with myself not telling you that what you're showing your child isn't what you believe it to be.
There goes that mindset of us versus them, the whole sports thing again. It's, you say that, then I can't speak to you ever again. But Mimi, I wanted to ask you, I know this might be on the spot a little bit, but we have talked a lot about
Disney.
the stepmother, the evil stepmother thing that
there's always
Disney presents.
an evil stepmother, or they're killing off a mother, or they're killing off a father, or you're left as an orphan. There's always something to provoke emotion from the adult that's watching with the child. So now the child watches the adult react like, oh no, look, her mom died, and then that's the emotion that they log in their own brain, is like, okay, I'm supposed to feel like that when this happens to me.
Right. Wasn't like Bambi some kind of experiment? I don't know if it was
Dumbo,
Bambi, but there was one of them where he realized, like, oh, I can manipulate people with emotions, like immediately by killing the mother of Bambi. Like, now I've got these people in my grips. Now they're emotionally unstable. They're not thinking from a mental or a spiritual point of view. Now they're emotional. So there is a veil that is put over somebody because they can only think of things through this one perception. I talk about it often that our emotions all have their own personality. You know, you can deal with the situation in so many different ways. When you're angry, when you're sad, when you're happy, when you're excited, whatever the emotion is, it comes with its own personality. So when you can induce someone into an emotional state, then all of a sudden now you can control them. And that's basically what MK Ultra is, right?
Exactly. That's what it is. They work you, right? They slowly break you down and get you to believe or change your belief systems. And they've got it perfected down to a science. You know, they got their tactics from the Nazis, and from Operation Paperclip, where they brought thousands of Nazi scientists over after World War II and incorporated them into NASA, the CIA, FBI, all over American science and high up in government. And what they would do is, there's multiple types, right? You can go into Project Monarch, where they use butterfly programming. There's the beta sex kitten, where they are sexualized at a young age. And what they do is they not only induce this trauma onto the artist, but then the artist then turns around and puts out productions that reflect that. You know, Miley Cyrus is a good example. She has a lot of MK Ultra symbols in her videos.
Britney Spears.
Of course, Britney Spears.
Yes, the queen of it. I
feel like
right?
Mariah Carey's on that list.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you look and there's a couple things to look for, right? One, look for them covering an eye, right? You see that always the celebrities have one eye.
That's the most famous one, right?
Right. That's the easiest, most obvious. Now, for someone to say that's just by, happenstance, come on. I mean, how many times have you taken a picture where you cover one eye? I mean, I've never done it. It's never even been an afterthought in my life.
Yeah,
so
never.
That's one. And then you look at butterfly symbolism, right? There's, whether it's tattoos or there's face paint a lot of times used, or backgrounds. I know Miley Cyrus, for her Hannah Montana show, her all of her gear was butterflies. Her guitar was a butterfly. She had a song that referenced butterflies. So it goes very, very deep. And, you know, there are some kids who have come out and spoke out against it and said that they were trauma victims and they were abused. And there have been people that at Disney, that multiple people at Disney that have been arrested for, sex with minors, sexual acts with minors.
Nickelodeon as well.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what you start seeing, is that these spots that are supposed to be set up for children end up being spots where children end up being abused and traumatized the most. And it, I keep saying we live in the upside down world, because right now it seems like everything that makes sense is wrong and everything that is crazy is being pushed forward and being presented to you as the right way to live, right solution to everything. And I just have a tough time with it, because I have an 8-year-old, and trying to raise him in this situation, you really have to be hands-on and be close with them and watch what they're consuming, because my son, he's a YouTube wizard. He can end up, I put him on cartoons or, singing videos. And the next thing I know, he's in, some video game channel with adults, and I'm like, no, not for you, man. But, and these kids, that's what a lot of parents do nowadays. They're so busy, right? Both parents are usually working.
And a lot of people want to be on their phones.
Yeah. Right. So what do? You may be sitting down with your kid, but you're in your phone, so you're not paying attention, and your kid's there watching whatever and just getting essentially brainwashed with this stuff and dumbed down to a point where, if the parent doesn't take any role or have any interaction with the child to see what they're learning or where they're coming from, next thing you know, the kid's a teenager and the parent has no idea who their child is or what they're into.
Right. I was just going to say, it's essentially the parent that is always responsible for sacrificing the child, essentially.
Yeah.
By not being on top of them, you are, I might get some flack for this, but you are sacrificing your child.
Yeah. And we're going through that. I have a 12-year-old and Mimi has a 16-year-old. So we're in this process of we weren't hands-on for up until a certain point, like you're saying.
Yeah, between work and everything, you're just so busy that you make excuses.
Right. And we have actually.
But that's what they do to you, right? And they make it so that both parents have to work to be able to sustain a household, so that when you do get home, you don't have the time. By the time you get dinner, baths, homework, whatever they got to do, everybody's exhausted, and the last thing you want to do really is do work. But you
just want to be mindless.
Yeah, and you don't know who they've talked to, what they've looked at. You don't know everything they've looked at and read and saw and heard.
Yeah, and we've pulled them out of certain things that they've been doing. I know with my 12-year-old, she was very big into Billie Eilish, especially when we moved here to Georgia during the pandemic. She was not happy. I took her away from all that stuff, but now she is such a different person. But I taught her the spiritual nature of life. I got her to have a personal relationship with the Creator, and I showed her how her thoughts and her actions create her universe. And the more she pays attention to me and what I say, the more she's learning, and she's starting to co-create on a level that 12-year-olds just really don't do. The way she's bringing things in and pushing things away. And Billie Eilish was one time, I mean, we all have demons in us, and I'm learning that parasites are demons. Demons are parasites. But there was this one time when I walked into the living room, and she wasn't often in the living room watching TV, but she's in there watching some movie of Billie Eilish, of how she became, some Netflix or YouTube thing of how she came to be. And I was like, turn that off. Like, that's nonsense. And she looked at me with this creepy, creepy look. And she goes, but father, I love her. And I was just like, that is not my daughter.
That wasn't her. Yeah.
Like she turned and looked at me. It was like so robotic, and she had this drawing, but now she took the drawing down. She replaced it with something more pure and beautiful. And she's actually the one that got me this WWJD bracelet. What would Jesus do? She got it for her and all of her friends. She gave me one, and she's really on this course of becoming some spiritual guru at a very young age. Essentially, she
That's
is
a
really
beautiful
doing
thing,
it.
man. That is beautiful.
And was the most difficult thing to endure some of the things I had to endure, because I allowed her to put all this
process.
Yeah, I allowed her to put all this nonsense in her that created this little monster essentially. And now she's this beautiful soul that understands things on a level that most adults don't get. And when I tell her, I'm like, man, we can't get that type of cereal anymore, she's like, oh, something else now. And she understands that, all right, well, he hasn't led me astray. He keeps telling me things that are helping me. So she's like willing to do it now. I'm willing to give up Frosted Flakes and
the
whatnot.
AirPods was a
the
recent
AirPods
thing, and she just got AirPods from someone for Christmas.
Right. And I told her, I was like, you can't use two because then it's running wirelessly through your brain and it'll mess you up. And she was like, well, what, can I still use one? I was like, well, I guess so. And she's like, okay.
Something we have to
And
research.
so she doesn't use two. She just uses one, which, hey, she made a compromise. We didn't argue about it. And she didn't, it was just a easy process because she was willing, because I speak to her with respect now. I don't yell at her the way I used to, the way it was drilled into me,
And what you may have done there is that butterfly effect, right? She may go tell her friends, hey guys, you probably don't want to wear both of them because you're helping other people out. And that's what's amazing about being a parent and watching your offspring grow. It's like these little beings that develop their own personalities and intricacies, but at the same time, they just want a leader. They want someone to be there for them.
They need direction.
Give them direction. Absolutely. Yeah. And I find that with my son because I co-parent with my ex-wife, and it's difficult some days because we have two different lifestyles. He does one set of thing when he's at mom's house and a different set of things over here. And it's not to be difficult or anything. And but I make him do little things. He has chores over here that he has to do, and he has things that he had. And the other day he says to me, he says, Dad, thank you very much for being there for me. And I was like, wow. I'm like, that's the best compliment I can get from my son, I think, ever. It just makes you realize that all they want is you to be there. They want your presence. Your presence is the present, and that's when I realized it, because I felt, going through, I went through a divorce in 2020, and it was like a death. I consider it was the death of my marriage and the death of my family. And but I told him, we had a deep talk about it recently. I told him, I said, buddy, but things just change. We have to be able to change with it and be able to make the best of what you have. And it's not about materials, and that's what this whole process taught me. I was in the material world, and now I could care less. I mean, I am as least material as I've ever been in my life. And that's what I'm trying to get across to him, because a lot of us equate our value in life to the things that we have or the things we're able to acquire, and not the things that we're able to pass on and spread to others, which is much more valuable than any possession you can own. I mean, unless a house over your head or food in your mouth, obviously. But that's one of the realizations I came to, is that, and when he told me that, I was like, okay, good. I'm doing something right, because I understand now that being there for people is more valuable than buying that expensive gift.
Yeah, that's an amazing compliment from an 8-year-old. Very profound.
I would much rather leave my children with, wisdom and knowledge and love than any item.
Things,
who cares about an item? I
a trust fund account, right?
Right. So that kind of leads me into, I know we got a little bit off of what I was just saying, but I'll transfer it back. And Disney that's how we got on to this about the children, because the children are the most important thing. It only takes 2 generations to make a completely different world by teaching them. So when I look at Disney and I come across different, this one YouTube, he's a crater Earth guy, and it's very interesting stuff. But he gets a lot of his information based upon Disney, the way Disney World is built, and Disney himself, where a lot of this stuff comes from. So when I look at Disney and I look at the World's Fairs, is Disney and also other amusement parks,
Ripley,
yeah, Ripley as well. But are these modern day World's Fairs where we're shaping the minds of the young people in order to want this, to want to get here, to want to have these things? Is that like the modern day World's Fair?
Oh wow, like Epcot,
Yeah.
Oh, without a doubt, because, and the interesting fact is, both Disney's father worked at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893.
Really?
And
he was
Ripley,
a carpenter. Yeah, so he worked on the construction there, supposedly. And then Disney himself worked at the 1964 New York World Fair, where they released It's a Small World for the first time, which is kind of interesting in that time frame of the 60s, and the message going out there that it's a small world. But to your point, that I really do, because when you think about Disney World, especially in Orlando, that was worked hand in hand not only with the CIA to acquire all the land, but then he worked with Wernher von Braun on a lot of things there in that. And Epcot was essentially von Braun's idea. It was it's the city of tomorrow, is what they wanted to build. And so that's right what Mimi said, right? Think about the world of tomorrow. Well, they're showing you where they want you to go. This is what we want you to think. This is how we want you to see things. And I really, now that you mention that, I've never connected the two.
Yeah, me either, until just now. I'm like dumbfounded. I'm like,
I meant to ask Howdy, but I forgot.
I'm like,
that was like a light bulb moment.
After all his involvement in putting things into the fairs, why not create a permanent one and make oodles of money through the children and through everything
and put
else.
them all over the world, right? Now they're in Europe, they're in Asia, they're all over. That's a great.
Wow.
And if you guys really want to dig deep into a rabbit hole scenario, if you look at the way that it's designed, the center of it, I don't know if it's the center of it, but it's I'll have to link it. It's that guy, the Crater Earth guy. Mimi, can you look up his YouTube channel, because it's not an English word, is not his thing, but he speaks English, but he's like somewhere over in Europe. But anyway, the way that Disney is designed, it's Hyperborea. It has a circle in the center, and then there's 4 planters, and it's a Hyperborea in the center of the earth. And that's how Disney World is designed. It's super, super weird.
Oh, they design it's like the layout of DC. It's the exact same thing. It was well planned.
Sorry, she's trying to find out what it was.
I always get fascinated with the Ripley guy too. Ever since we've been to Ripley's, believe it or not, it's not. He was involved with World Fair things and finding exhibits to put in there from around the world. And that was his little backstory of how he would get to these odd places. He would go looking for something for a World's Fair. So he always fascinates me too. I wonder if he had anything to do with Disney as well. I'm sure.
He's one of those too. And then you throw in P.T. Barnum.
Yes, Barnum.
Another guy who, I haven't looked deep. I watched one.
I started to.
Michelle Gibson's done some good work on them recently. And actually, he's from. He built this crazy house in Bridgeport, Connecticut, back in the 1800s. And I had a post on Instagram a couple weeks ago about it, and it was just it looks like one of the old Moorish houses, Moorish palaces. And so it was one of those where, did they build it, or did they, find it dead?
Uncover it.
Right. It is a great deception to get them, certain people, experts, traveling around looking for exhibits when that's not really what they're there for.
Right, they
Exactly.
founded it. They didn't it's never built, it's always founded.
Yes,
But
always founded.
I wanted to give out the guy's YouTube, channel that I was talking about. It's, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but it's GODGEVLAMSTE. So, like, Gaj Lamsty? Yeah, I'm not sure, but he speaks English, but he has some really, really great work. But so leading back into the World's Fairs, I wanted to ask you about the Crystal Palaces. This is a part that really isn't covered by many people, and this is another smoking gun. These Crystal Palaces that were built with more glass than was available for the entire world for building materials at that time. Do you want to get into the Crystal Palaces and the unbelievable nature of them?
Oh yeah, their story is well, and it coincides with the World's Fairs, right? Because the first two Crystal Palaces were from the World's Fair. The 1851 London Expo had the original Crystal Palace, and now when you hear Crystal Palace, you're thinking, okay, what is this thing? We're talking about a structure that is built with iron framing and then incorporates glass as the whole facade for the most part. There's some timber used as well, but it's mainly just iron columns and glass. And so the one they built in London took up 18 acres. It was just shy of 1 million square feet in exhibition space.
That's so crazy.
You think about the size of that building. It was 1,851 feet long, which was the same as the year it was built, supposedly.
The Emerald City.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it's just, so to make this one, it took 3,300 iron columns, took like 10 million feet of glass, and then like 600,000 cubic feet of timber. So we're talking about, massive amounts of supplies. And then the best part of the story is that they constructed this whole thing, which is like, I think it's like 3 times the size of St. Paul's Cathedral, which is a monster. They constructed it in 6 to 9 months.
I thought it was gonna be like a week.
Yeah.
And then to make it even better, afterwards, they just take it down and then they rebuild it over in a place called Sydenham Hill in 1852, where it stays there for a few years, and then eventually it burns in fire.
Oh, glass burned in fire?
Iron burned in fire.
Yeah, glass and iron.
And you look at these, I mean, obviously they had wood on the inside, right? I mean, there's timber floors and they use some supports and things like that. But yeah, to see it. But here's the thing. When you get into these Crystal Palaces, no matter how deep you get into it, whether you're looking in America, you're looking in Canada, in Europe, they all end up burning down. They all get destructed by fire. And so you get back to that World Fair mentality of, okay, so we had Crystal Palaces. They built these lavish, extraordinary palaces, and then they're just gonna burn them down. They all burn in a fire. Some mysterious and some were straight up arson. And so you start seeing them. You see New York built one in 1853. That was like, I think it was like 1,000 feet by 500. So it wasn't nearly the same size as London, but it was big. And that one, again, 7 months to build it. Like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. And there's so many. There's one in Germany called the Glass Palace. That was from 1854. Again, another it's massive. It's like I think it was like 750 feet by 250 feet. So it's, I mean, again, and that one was what was it, 6 months, I think, on that one. So
wow.
You're and okay, yeah. Let me see if I have the number. Oh yeah,
You have
here's
to be so delicate with that type of stuff too.
Well, that's the thing. You're thinking about these, and you look at some of the glass pieces in this. We're not talking about like your typical window. We're talking about massive pieces of glass that are rounded as well. So all it takes is one slip, and you break it, and good luck replacing it. because I mean, like you said, the amount of materials being made at that time doesn't match what was being built all around, especially America at the time.
Right. Right. And wasn't
So,
there? No, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Wasn't there other structures in America at these World's Fairs where there were more bricks used than were available for use? You know, building materials that were available for use around the world. Do you know of that? I think I've picked that up somewhere. I'm not sure where I've
I've
heard it though.
heard it. Yeah. I just, you think about it and it just doesn't seem to make sense. When you're building, 200 buildings in a 2-year time period, how are you producing enough brick for all those buildings? I mean, and we're talking late 1800s. So it just and if you even can produce it, how are you transporting it? You're getting all of that by
Operation Warp Speed.
yeah. And then when you get it to the site, who's handling it? It's just, it doesn't make any sense because and then you look at the pictures of the quote unquote construction of some of these buildings, and you're looking at it and you're like, well, are they constructing it or are they breaking it down?
Right.
You can't really tell because it's in most of the pictures, you have the base of the structure already in place. You'll see a little bit of scaffolding around the perimeter of the building, maybe 1 or 2 people in the photo, usually very little supplies or anything, being used to actually do the construction. And so and you figure for the Chicago World Fair, they had people that would pay to go watch it be constructed. Supposedly, they were saying, there were thousands of people that would come on a daily basis to watch the construction, and not one of them took a picture. That
Yeah, that's
seems
strange.
yeah. And then when you get to the fair itself, especially in Chicago, they made the price so high to be able to take pictures in there that, the average person like you or I couldn't afford it, because in a lot of instances, to take pictures at the fair would cost as much as your whole trip for the fair.
Wow. Just to
Yeah.
take a picture?
Just to take picture, yep, of the buildings that you're in. So that's why one of the things you don't see a lot when you're looking at these pictures is any cameras. You see these people walking around the fairs and they don't have any, cameras or anything to take pictures or do anything that would, look like that. And so it's interesting because one of the things, I'm trying to find the quote here. I had a quote that it just blew my mind when I was reading it, because it made so much sense about the fair that these people, okay, here you go. It says, "We're the people at the fair under a spell. Everyone about us moved softly and spoke gently. No one seemed hurried or impatient. All were under a spell that held us from the opening of the fair until its close." And that's what I almost feel like this was. It was a ritual in a sense. And that these people, some of these people may have been placed here, right? I don't know. I've heard people claim that, call them the inhabitors, where these people were just kind of almost dropped off at the World's Fair. And because you look at them and you watch them walk around and they're kind of in amazement, and they're not really, celebrating, and there's no fights. Everybody's moving kind of, in a orderly manner. And you think you had 27.5 million people there and really no instances of any issues or anything. It's just seems really, really strange.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. What you were saying with the bricks, here's a little piece of information you might not be familiar with. I wasn't familiar with it when I was told it, that bricks, so bring back mud floods a little bit, that if you leave mud up against bricks long enough, the bricks will turn into mud. And this is why we have like large, so in certain areas, they'll have large, really big rocks that don't look like they're construction type of rocks, and they're like the base of the house, and then way up above, then they'll have the brick, and it's like, well, that doesn't look right. Why is that? And I had a guy on, Ryan Alexander, who has studied flamenco and studied the mud floods, and he actually goes around graveyards trying to find graves from 1780 to 1850, and it's like they don't really exist anywhere. But he told me that if mud is up against brick long enough, that brick will turn into mud or dirt, or that type of sediment. So it's a very interesting thing, and how
And that makes
all that works.
sense. That makes sense. And being up here, I'm in New England, so I actually, on the street that I live on, there are a lot of old houses from the late 1700s, early 1800s. And it's funny you say that, because you look at the foundations of a lot of them, and they're these large rocks that have, whether it's cement or whatever filled in between them as the base. And then just about, probably about 1.5 feet, 2 feet above ground level is where the brick or the house itself would start.
Yeah,
And
super
that's
weird because when you look at it, you're like, that doesn't look right. But I mean, that makes a lot of sense that, yeah, you wouldn't want the brick to be touching the ground because, oh, you know what happened before? There was a mud flood, and all the houses turned into mud.
Yep. Well, and it's interesting you say that, because you think about like things like star forts,
Yeah.
and Fort Jefferson down in Florida had used 16 million bricks to build that
Wow.
structure. And we're talking again late mid 1800s that they built that.
Mm.
So, and it's in the middle of the ocean. They built this large, huge star fort in the middle of the ocean back
Yeah,
then,
I never
and
really
and
thought of
used
where do all these supplies come from.
Right.
yeah.
Who brought in all these bricks? I never even,
Right.
And that's one of the
And
things that kind of gets overlooked, right? You think about it, oh, it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't, you don't really, and then you start thinking about it, and you think about the magnitude of it at
Mm.
that time, and you're like, wow, this really doesn't make sense. You have to question it and wonder how, can
Just
you
to
please tell
make
me?
that many bricks takes a long
mhm.
time, let alone
Hmm.
make them, let them sit, let them harden,
Right, and
Yeah.
I heard you say something, on Mark's podcast, the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, that the guy Red Bricks, who, says that mountains are melted buildings. I mean, it could be to some extent. I think that he has a point, but the way he presents it sounds so outlandish. But that he got interviewed by Bloomberg, and they tried making this all look like nonsense because they got someone who, if he's not showing you the photographic evidence of what he's talking about, it sounds so crazy that you can make anyone sound ridiculous. Now, what is your take on that? That if you're not looking at it, that it sounds crazy. Is that just something that I'm perceiving from being a skeptic, or is it so unbelievable on its face, or so counter from the mainstream narrative that it just sounds crazy that they took someone who sounds so ridiculous to put that as, oh, this is what they believe?
Yeah, I think they were just looking for somebody to nail. Honestly, I bet you what
Mm.
they did is they just typed in Tartarian into Twitter or something and see who they could get who had a lot
They
of
probably heard him on
followers.
Tinfoil Hat. Honestly, I think they
Or
heard him
that
there.
too. Yeah. And then you get but they also attacked John Levy in there too.
Oh
So
yeah.
they went after him and some of his things. But I think that that Bloomberg was a hit piece. That article
Hmm.
was a total hit piece. And that's when you start seeing the media, the corporate media trying to slander and destroy narratives, that you're kind of
On to
close
something. Yeah.
to something that they don't want you to find, because that's the way they do it, right? The way they make us sound crazy by taking these outlandish things and fringe things. And I'll be the first one. I follow Red Bricks. I like the work that he does. Now, do I believe it 100%? No. I think some of it is a stretch, but I think there are many examples that he provides that, from my novice point of view, I would say, yeah, I think I agree with him. It looks like a
Yeah.
melted bill. It looks like that mountain just melted, and there was a building there at one time. Now, to
Right.
say every single mountain in the world is a former castle or building, I don't see the evidence to that. But
Right.
if you tell me everything on any subject, I'm going to say I'm not going to believe that, because I don't think there is anything that is everything wraps
The
into one.
absolutes is when you know somebody's bullshitting you.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for that, you really need the visual aid, where you
Yes.
need to set the stage. Like, you need to say that, okay, let's look at all these mountains that have seemingly people have carved homes into. Well, actually, let's look at the reverse, that maybe they were homes or buildings and they were melted somehow. And how would it be melted? That's the ridiculous part. People like melted buildings. But when we're talking about the second destruction of the world by fire, okay, well, then that makes more sense, that it was something so hot that sucked up oxygen. Whether it's comets, everything was being destroyed by fire for some reason. At some time, earthquakes were happening. You know, all this was going on. When you set the stage, then you can get into it. But when you just talk about it in an audio fashion, or you're just writing about it, you know, you need some kind of context in order to understand it. So I think that they really went after someone who is good with the visual aid. He's great when you go watch his videos, and he points things out to you. But if you only have the audio or writing, then it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, you walk up to someone and tell them, "Hey, every mountain is a melted building." They're gonna automatically think you're crazy, and that does
Right.
sound crazy. But then when you lay it with the pretext of what you just said,
Mm-hmm.
then you can at least say, "Okay, well, maybe you're onto something. Can you show me, a
Right.
few examples?" And
Yeah.
but that's where we are right now with everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a wild time that anything that catches a little bit of steam right now is getting shot down and is being attacked. And whether it's medical information, whether it's historical information, it's all being branded as crazy because it does not follow the narrative.
Yeah.
And that's what it really is. I mean, I mean, speaking from personal experience, I've learned more about this whole setup that they have more in the last 5 years than I ever thought I would have. And I feel like I've met a lot of people that are in the same boat as me that have made that same conclusion. And it's a time where when, like you were saying before, you get enough minds together, like you're saying with your daughter, if she puts her mind to a certain area, she's going to reap that benefit in that area. And I think collectively as a whole, as we start exposing these things one by one, we're going to start to see it, because I really feel like we're in the Wizard of Oz, right? We're getting close to Oz. We see the curtain right there. We just need someone to pull it back and expose everything to everybody, because we've seen it exposed bits and pieces here and there. And there just has to be that one or two things that lets them see behind the curtain. But with that said, there are many who will never even look. If
Right.
you pull the curtain back and
They don't
show
even
them,
know it's a curtain.
no, exactly. They're going to turn and run. They're going to, they want to live that. What I like to say is they want the Wall-E life, the Disney movie Wall-E, where they get to sit in their little motorized scooter and drink their soda and just not have to do anything all day. I just want to move around. I don't want to do any activity, nothing. Just
Mm-hmm.
feed me that propaganda. I'm good with whatever you want to feed me mainstream. I'll eat it
Ignorance is
up.
bliss.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I gotta tell you, my friend, this was a great, great conversation. I'm so grateful to have you on. I'm so happy that we could make this happen, especially, today. This was a great day of podcasting. Having you and Howdy on. Uh, I mean, this was just a phenomenal conversation, a really good discussion about things, and you came and you really blew the doors off of some of this deception that has been occurring. Is there anything left that you didn't say that you wanted to say?
No, I'm like I said, I just touched the surface on the old America. So when I get a little bit more on that, I will definitely hit you up and we can
Okay,
chat
yeah,
on that
that'll be
too,
great.
because that's something that's really fascinating. And
I'll
I
have to
found
check
some.
out those books too.
Yeah, they're only like 80 pages each. So
Oh, okay.
it's interesting. And it's funny because some of the information's really, really good, and some of it's just straight bullshit. Like
Yeah,
some of it you read it and you're like, no, I know this isn't true. You're just trying to
right.
push it me way that way. But a lot of questions open up your eyes. And there's another one called I believe it's Pyramids in America. Um, that's out there also that I'm interested to read, because between the mounds, the pyramids, the old buildings, it all ties into this old infrastructure. And I like to think along the lines of Michelle Gibson, that at one time there was this large collective system on Earth, almost like a grid, an Earth grid that we utilized, and now we are just consumers. We don't give anything back. We don't work with the environment at all. We are just consuming until we get to a point of no return. And I hope we don't get there, but it's looking that way.
Yeah. Do you want to mention the names of those books that you were just talking about? The
They
Old
are
America?
called America is the True Old World.
Okay.
And they're on Amazon, and one is called The Promised Land, and one is called MU Discovered.
Okay.
So,
I will definitely be looking into those books. I like to ask all my guests, and of course, at the end, I'll let you tell everyone where to find you. But do want to ask, like I ask everyone, what is your go-to grounding technique? You're studying all this crazy stuff that could get you really stuck in a rabbit hole of a paranoia, or whatever types of thinking that breaking free from the matrix can lead you into. What is your way of staying human and staying in your, keeping your wits about you?
I like to do physical activity. So I like going to the gym and working out. I have a 2-year-old German Shepherd, and we go on as many hikes out in nature as possible,
Nice.
and just being out with her. And then I have gotten into Wim Hof's breathing techniques. And
Okay, that
I
sounds good.
haven't dared dip into the cold showers yet. I tried it a little bit, but
Yeah,
I'm
no.
not quite there yet. But I'll tell you what, I have an autoimmune disease that I came down with in 2016, and I was on all the pharmaceuticals from Big Pharma, and nothing. I was getting worse, and I was having suicidal thoughts, homicidal dreams, nightmares. It was just a mess. So I got off of those, and I needed something. And it was just at the time that Wim Hof's book came out, and so I read it and started doing his breathing technique, and I am medicine free, and knock on wood, I haven't had any autoimmune issues since. So
Wow.
I recommend to everyone breathing, as stupid as it sounds, get into some breath work and just focusing, whether it's meditation. That's another thing I'm into. I'm not as focused with that. I tend to skip that more than I should. But I make sure I get my breathing in. And that has helped. Not only, like you're saying, you get so into this research and things that, at times it can be dark, right? You start seeing all the lies, and you're like, man, I've been totally duped my whole life on some things. And that's a tough pill to swallow. But doing things like that, like grounding, like interaction, with other people. I love just forgetting everything, go hang out with my son, because an 8-year-old, man, he doesn't have a care in the world. So, you go hang out. I recommend that to everybody. Go do something with young kids. I seriously, young kids, they
Yeah,
give you
wholesome things with young kids.
well, yeah, no. Yeah, we're not talking Epstein things here. No.
Yeah.
I'm talking, go coach a local youth team or something, and go help out some kids, dedicate your time, volunteer your
Become
time.
like children again.
Yeah. And that's my grandfather always said to me, he goes, you have to grow old, but you don't have to grow up. And I said, I mean, I thank him to this day, because I consider myself a 43-year-old kid at times, because I can be as entertained as by the most juvenile of things.
Yeah. And that Wim Hof method, I did that. I had my crown chakra was burst open through too big of a bong hit already. And so, yeah, it kind of happened accidentally. And I think that I had another similar thing happen when I was 14, that I took too big of a hit, and I actually passed out from it. Uh,
Whoa.
it was like 30 seconds I was passed out, and I had this elaborate dream. It was very strange. It was like I entered an alternate reality. But so when I did the Wim Hof method, the first time I did it, I saw red Aztec symbols in front of my face as if you were doing LSD or another psychedelic. Like it was just
I have had a couple
appearing.
experiences like that where it's almost hallucinogenic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is a great way because that's how I do my meditations. It's breath work plus meditation. It's all in one, but it's definitely part of that. And I know you have the autoimmune disease. I'm actually going to have a woman on in a few days here who she set us onto this book called The Cure for Everything, which Mimi is reading, and it's in this book, they say that there's only two types of illnesses. It's either something in you or something's on you. It's either a poison that's on your body or a parasite that's in your body. And all diseases extend from those two things. So maybe we could, I'll talk to her during the podcast about autoimmune disease. I'll bring that up and see if there's something that she recommends on how to,
Oh, there absolutely is.
Oh, that'd be great.
yeah.
There are protocols for just about everything
Yeah, and the book
in
is
that book,
called
and it's
what's the
broken
book
down with
called?
recipes.
The Cure for
The
Everything?
Cure for All
The
Diseases.
Cure
I
for All
think it's
Diseases.
called. I have it right here on my.
Yeah, it's really great, and it teaches you can build your own frequency thing that heals you in some sense. For like $25, you can build your own thing.
Really?
It
Yeah, you
teaches
build
it.
your own syncometer, and so her concept is that everything has its own frequency, and when you can block that frequency in a certain way, and you only need
Mhm.
like a 5-volt battery, and some, it's very very, very interesting. It's called The Cure for All Diseases, and it's by Dr. What was her name here? Dr. Hulda Clark, Hulda Clark.
Yeah, so
And it has case studies in there where the names are changed, but it gives tons of case studies where, with age, what was wrong with them, whether it be a skin rash or something like MS, something serious, HIV, all kinds of things.
yeah,
Oh, that sounds
so
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
so hopefully that'll help you out. And do you want to let our audience know where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at the Great Deception Podcast, and then same thing with YouTube, Bitchute, and Odysee. I have it's all the Great Deception Podcast, and then also on Alt Media United. You can find all my stuff there. So if you have any questions, go check that out too. Alt Media United has a lot of great podcasters
Yeah.
out there, and it's a great spot to go see some other podcasts if you're looking for new people to find.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a part of alt media. I think we the same time, the same like day or week or whatever
Yeah, we
we
were
got
like the
at it.
same week or whatever. It was great.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so everybody do yourself a favor and go check out the Great Deception podcast, the Instagram, the YouTube, all of it. Matt does really, really great work. He does really in-depth studies, and you will benefit yourself greatly if you go check his stuff out. So, Matt, we want to thank you so much for coming on. We want to thank the audience for being here. And everybody, if you're still here, make sure you like, share, comment, rate, review, all that good stuff that helps out the algorithms. And I think that'll do everything. So we will talk to you